For decades now, we've all been told the story of the global fertility crisis, and it's always been framed as a story about choice. But what if there's a deeper biological chapter to this story that we've been missing all along? Let's take a look at the evidence. Okay, let's just dive right in, because the data here it's pretty stark. In just a little over 70 years, the global average fertility rate has been slashed by more than half. I mean, we've gone from about 5 children per woman back in 1950 all the way down to roughly 2.2 today. And that number is teetering right on the edge of the population replacement level. You know, the standard explanation is that this is all just a consequence of social progress. But this explainer, which is based on some really groundbreaking new research, it asks a critical question. What if it's not just that people are choosing to have fewer children? What if conceiving itself is actually becoming biologically harder? So to really wrap our heads around this new perspective, we've got to first look at the conventional wisdom and where it's starting to show some serious cracks. For years, demographers have pointed to these key factors, right? As societies modernize, women get more education, more career opportunities, people move into cities, and of course, contraception becomes widely available. And yeah, all of this logically leads to smaller families. It makes perfect sense on the surface. But here's where that simple story gets, well, complicated. Governments around the world are throwing billions of dollars at pro-baby policies, baby bonuses and stuff like that. And for the most part, they're just not moving the needle. At the exact same time, the global demand for fertility treatments is absolutely exploding. These two facts just don't fit neatly into the it's all a choice model. And this recent call to action from The Lancet, wow, it just captures this shifting paradigm perfectly. It's basically arguing that we have to look beyond sociology and start asking some really urgent biological questions. And that is exactly what a new wave of research is finally doing. So our first stop on this whole investigation is Denmark. And why Denmark? Well, because its comprehensive national health data gives us this unique, almost unprecedented window into the problem. Now, before we go any further, there's a super important definition we have to get straight. We're not just talking about fertility, which is, the number of kids people actually have. We're talking about fecundity. That's the underlying biological capacity to conceive in the first place. And from a medical and public health view, that distinction is absolutely crucial. So how do you measure this underlying biological ability across an entire population? Well, researchers developed this revolutionary new metric, the Comprehensive Unassisted Pregnancy Rate, or CUPR. What it does is it counts all pregnancies, so that's births and abortions, that happen without any medical help. Think of it as our best look yet at a population's raw, natural ability to conceive. Now here's where it gets really interesting. If you just look at the total number of births in Denmark, you see this pattern where it looks like women born in the 70s, for example, just had kids later than their mothers did, but they eventually caught up and had almost as many. It looks like a simple story of delaying childbirth. But, and this is the big but, when researchers applied that CUPR metric, that whole catch-up story completely vanished. What it revealed instead was a steady, unmistakable decline in the number of unassisted pregnancies for each new generation. Younger women were simply conceiving naturally less often than the generations before them. So how is that biological gap being filled? One word: technology. Today, more than 1 in 10 babies in Denmark, over 12%, are born thanks to treatments like IVF. This shows it's not just a choice. For a growing number of people, it's a medical necessity that's been masking a much deeper problem with our underlying fecundity. So Denmark's data is a huge warning sign, for sure. But the biological evidence doesn't stop there, not even close. These signs are popping up all over the globe. Maybe the most well-known piece of this whole puzzle is the drop in male sperm counts. I mean, what started as a kind of controversial finding way back in 1992 is now a well-established global trend. It's been confirmed by massive studies showing the decline has actually gotten faster since the year 2000. And what's so critical to understand is that this isn't just about sperm. Scientists are seeing a parallel rise in a whole cluster of related male reproductive issues, everything from testicular cancer to birth defects like undescended testes. This suggests there might be a common root cause for all of them, something that's likely happening during fetal development. So what could that common cause possibly be? Well, a leading hypothesis points to something that is pervasive in our modern world: endocrine disrupting chemicals, or EDCs. These are substances in plastics and pesticides in countless everyday products that basically mess with our body's crucial hormone systems. And we're not talking about a rare exposure here. A massive European project that literally monitored people's bodies found that exposure to these chemicals isn't the exception, it's the rule. We are all carrying a cocktail of these industrial compounds inside of us. And this really highlights a fundamental shift in what we even think of as an environmental threat. Our parents' generation, they worried about visible stuff like smog and acid rain. Our generation faces a totally new threat: invisible chemicals that don't just pollute the air around us, but the environment inside our very bodies. So when you put all of this evidence together, the Danish data, the falling sperm counts, the chemical exposures, the picture becomes alarmingly clear. The fertility crisis needs to be reframed. What this all really points to is a major paradigm shift. The old story was that fertility decline is purely a social choice. The new reality, it's a complex mix of choice and a decline in our biological capacity to reproduce. This isn't just an economic or cultural issue anymore. It's a public health crisis, and it's one that financial incentives alone are never going to fix. The researchers behind this work, they sum it up perfectly. They say the solution requires a holistic approach, one that considers both people's choices, their hearts, and also the biological and environmental factors that are affecting their hormones. And that really leaves us with a profound and, frankly, a pretty unsettling question. If the very fabric of our modern world is undermining our most fundamental biological function, the ability to reproduce, it forces us to rethink what progress even means and what we're willing to change to protect our collective future.